college and so on, which I'd been to. So democracy became a very, very important element in Indian independence work. And Gandhi and Nehru became the spokespeople for that. I think Gandhi was the spiritual democrat who wanted a kind of, if everybody finds God within and pursues non-violence, then we can find freedom tomorrow. We can liberate India, because the British rule by that time was premised on militarism and lies and dishonour and a kind of racism. So Gandhi opposed all that, as Attenborough's great film shows. And people I worked with in the Gandhi Foundation had met Gandhi as a young man. When he was an old man. My friends met him when they were young. And that tradition lives on. Nehru was a very intelligent man. His father was the Grand Master of the Freemasons of Bengal. And he was educated partly at Cambridge and elsewhere to a high level, and had a very sophisticated understanding of political philosophy. He appears in the second volume on modern Indian thought. He was a man of great integrity who supported Gandhi and the independence movement, even though it cost him many periods of imprisonment. There was a linking of criticisms of British imperial capitalism, and many Indians adopted socialism as their raison d'etre. And Nehru adopted a kind of, let's say, a Fabian socialism, I would say, which I would agree with. Another great thinker at this time was Radhakrishnan, who was, as I mentioned before, a Hindu philosopher. He became a professor at Oxford, but he became the first president of India as well, and was a great servant of the state, a proper intellectual. I met a chap called Lakshmipati who came to visit me when I was working at the Gandhi Foundation. He'd been the secretary to Ambedkar at the time he was writing the Indian Constitution, which is a masterpiece of democratic process. I think the best way to oppose Modi, what he's been doing, is to just set up a group inside the Indian Parliament, which I visited, by the way. And like I did, I ran 30 meetings in the UK Parliament and the House of Lords, so in the Raj Sabha, there should be a kind of working group that would look at the ways that Modi has corrupted the Constitution, challenge it from within with proper legal and political minds, actually looking at the small print, because that's how you defend a parliamentary democracy from within. That's how we finally got rid of Johnson in the UK, because he offended parliamentary rules, he broke the rules, he had no understanding of ethics or integrity, and he's finally had to go and fall on his sword. That's how Modi could be seen off from within by a resistance internally, using actual law and actual democratic values and the Constitution itself. I've just finished reading about Indira Gandhi, and many of the Modi fans all grumble and say Indira Gandhi was a monster and that's why the Congress Party can't be elected. I really don't agree with that. Having read her life, her friendship with Krishnamurti, she was an intellectual, old Indira, and my mother used to really like her. She belonged to that generation. And I think what's very interesting, the thing that most people say against Indira is the emergency that she instituted in the 1970s, and that it was all, terrible. And 1978 saw great violence against Indira Gandhi. It's all written there. But what I think is so interesting is that I think Indira Gandhi brought in the emergency because she was afraid of the growing power of the RSS, which was there, weaponizing Hinduism into becoming a sort of fascist thing. Indira belonged to the Nehru old school of secular philosophical Hinduism, which was more theosophically inclined and more intelligent. And so what's so tragic about her case is that she tried during the emergency to crush the RSS, but in the end they won. I mean, she herself was blown up in a terrorist assassination. She paid for this with her life because tragically she'd been sucked into the politics of the Punjab and sent the army into Amritsar, which I would have dealt with that differently through arbitration and using the law and so on. And then she paid for it with her life, and she failed ultimately. But I don't think she did so because she was wrong. I don't think it was because the RSS were right and she was wrong. I think on the contrary, she was absolutely spot on about the dangers posed by the RSS against democracy. It was just tragic that she wasn't able to effectively stop their rise to power, and Modi was part of their entourage even back then. And then Rajiv Gandhi, again, her son, inherited this mantle of trying to stabilise Indian democracy, and was a great thinker. And although he wasn't an intellectual in the formal sense, he was trained as a pilot. He's a man of great courage and charisma and values. He himself was killed by, this time, a kind of a Hindu fanatic from an extremist Tamil faction, because he'd been trying to mediate and moderate and bring common sense down to the Sri Lanka situation. Again, another martyr for democracy, actually, which is tragic that should have happened. And my friend Sam Petroda, mourns his loss to this day, as do many millions of people in India. Because India, whenever you go down the violence route, chaos comes in its wake, as the world will discover with this tragedy in Putinism in Ukraine. So I end really with an appeal to my dear friends in India to study all this, learn about why democracy is a public good in India, but also in Britain, in France, in America, in Israel, and in ancient Athens. Reread the Declaration of Pericles, find out why it matters. And I think our Jain monks, Acharya Tulsi, and our Buddhist monks, who understood all this, can give us the spiritual power, the spiritual enlightenment to make a stand for these values, as can the proper Hindu sages of the Upanishads, and the Christian tradition that I talked about earlier, the Christian democratic tradition of radical enlightened people that want the kingdom of God for us all. That's the very definition of what a democracy is, in my opinion. That's what Hegel understood by it, and T.H. Green, and the authentic universal democratic tradition that we need to come together if we're going to build a world of peace and right reason. And that's what our work is about, is the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum. So thank you for listening, and let's get on with the work.